So now that we've got that set up, we can set up the actual translation. From global configuration mode, IP NAT, and again, I prefer to do it inside starting since it makes things less confusing than swapping it back and forth. IP NAT inside source, and this time we're specifying a list. So IP NAT inside source list, the name of our ACL we just created, internal underscore addresses. And remember, we don't have, so we can specify an interface or a pool, but remember we don't have a static IP on our WAN, so we got to specify an interface. So IP NAT inside source list, internal underscore addresses, interface, serial 0, and then here's the big important one. Make sure you include that overload command so that it can overload multiple translations to that one public IP. NAT Overload is now set up and all the internal LAN hosts are sharing the WAN. The last thing we need to do is add the static NAT configurations that we talked about before to point the HTTP and HTTPS to the internal web server. So just need to add those statements. IP NAT inside source static, and it's on 80 and 443 it's going to be TCP on both of those. So IP NAT inside source static TCP, our IP of our web server 172.16.1.80, port 80. And again, we don't have a static IP for our WAN, so we got to specify the interface. Interface serial 0, and again, port number 80. So IP NAT inside static TCP 172.16.1.80, port 80, interface serial 0, port 80. So that's for 80. We need to, well, it's actually missing there, but we need to set it up for 443 as well. So it's going to look exactly like this line, but you're going to exchange these port 80s for port 443. So IP NAT inside static TCP 172.16.1.80, 443, interface serial 0, 443. Once that's done, you can view the translation table and confirm that it's definitely configured. So if you do a show IP NAT translation, man, you get a lot of translations in there. You know, anytime like traffic's going from any of those hosts, you're going to get a new entry, and you can kind of go through and see what each of those are. And you can also see that we've still got that static mapping for 172.16.1.80 to map everything to port 80. So once you've got configurations done, when you need to verify NAT, one of the most important commands is show run. Just go through your configurations and make sure they're there. Make sure your inside and your outside NAT interfaces are configured, all that good stuff. Show IP NAT translations to see the individual translations, and then you can do a show IP NAT statistics like here, and it'll show you, how many translations are currently running, all that kind of stuff. Troubleshooting NAT. Most NAT problems are due to bad or misconfigurations. So as I said a second ago, verify that IP NAT inside and IP NAT outside are properly applied. If you're using subinterface or VLAN configurations, IP NAT inside and outside must be applied to each subinterface, not just the physical interface. So keep that in mind as well. You always want to verify that it's not a DNS issue when you're doing something. So make sure if you're having problems with the individual LAN devices working, make sure you can ping like a public IP rather than just trying to pull up a web address. Clear IP NAT translations. Star will get rid of anything in your translation table so that new translations can jump in there. And if you're really running into problems and need to see some granular details of what's going on with NAT, you can do a debug IP NAT. Remember, again, with any debug, make sure you undebug all when you're done, as that takes up a lot of router resources. That is the end of chapter 21. Any questions on that portion?